Hey, Dr. O here, and I want to go through some of the antagonist pairs of the muscles for our unit. Now you have this PowerPoint available to you. You also have a PDF of the PowerPoint slides available to you. So you will probably want to work through these slides and fill these things out, or you can just take your notes. It's up to you. All right, so muscle motions. All right, so what muscle flexes the arm at the elbow? Well, that is going to be the biceps brachii. And then what muscle extends it at the elbow? That's going to be the triceps brachii. So we can then say that the biceps and the triceps, because they work opposite of each other, these are an antagonistic pair. Let's take a look at another one. So what muscle adducts the arm at the shoulder? What brings it back to midline? Well, of the ones that we studied, we know that the pectoralis muscle does that. So what two muscles abduct the arm? Because we studied two that do. Well, the deltoid is going to be one of them, and the supraspinatus is another one. So in this case, our antagonist and agonist, our antagonistics are going to be pectoralis against the deltoid and the supraspinatus. So what muscle moves the scapula medially? What causes it to retract? Well, that's going to be the rhomboid muscles. There's a major and the minor. And what muscle that we studied moves the scapula laterally into protraction? It's going to be the serratus anterior. So the rhomboids and the serratus anterior work opposite of each other. So what muscle flexes the thigh at the hip, the one that brings the entire leg forward? Well, the iliopsoas does that. We could actually even say the quadriceps muscle because they do cross at that point. But you were specifically taught that the iliopsoas does that. All right, so then what muscle extends the thigh at the hip? Glute max. That's the big one. So the iliopsoas and the glute max work opposite of each other. Now, what four muscles are going to abduct the thigh at the hip, basically cause it to move away from midline? Oh, I've got four of these here. So we've got the glute medius, that's the most lateral. We've got the sartorius, that's that muscle that attaches to the hip bone in front and snakes around the anterior thigh to the medial knee. We have the tensor fascia lata, which is kind of got an anterior lateral attachment to the hip bone, and then it moves laterally down the thigh, creates the IT band and attaches to the lateral knee. And then the piriformis. Piriformis is a deep muscle in the butt. But the way that it's attached to the femur bone, when it contracts, it actually helps rotate the femur laterally or externally, and then will also cause it to abduct. All right, so what two muscles did we study that are going to bring the thigh back into adduction? And these two are going to be the adductor longus and the gracilis. What four muscles extend the leg at the knee? So what causes knee extension? Well, these four muscles are going to be the quadriceps. We got the rectus femoris and then the three vastus muscles, which are the lateralis, medialis, and the intermedius. And then what three muscles, I put four here, but what three muscles are going to flex the leg at the knee, cause it to bend? Those are going to be the muscles that are on the back of the thigh. And these are going to be the the semimembranosus and the semitendinosus and the biceps femoris. Those three make up the hamstring. Now we could include the gastrocnemius here because the gastroc does cross from the tibia to the femur, and when it shortens, it will cause the knee to bend as well. But we absolutely want you to know that the hamstrings and the quadriceps are antagonistic of each other. What two muscles cause plantar flexion? What two muscles cause you to point your toe? Well, these are a couple of muscles that are found on the posterior aspect of the lower leg, and that would be the gastrocnemius and the soleus. And we learned one muscle that causes you to dorsiflex the foot. That's the tibialis anterior. So let's talk about the motions that our rotator cuff muscles can do, as well as the teres major. Teres major, even though it's located on the scapula, is not one of the rotator cuff muscles. So let's take a look. So I made this chart so you can see all the different motions that happen at the shoulder and which muscles are responsible for contributing to that action. So we have flexion, which is the movement of the arm anterior to the torso, extension, which is moving the arm posterior to the torso, and then the humeral head can spin in the joint. And if we rotate the arm like towards, we spin it towards the front of the body, that's medial rotation. And then if we spin it like away from the anterior part of the body, then it's, so the thumb faces outwards, that's lateral rotation. Adduction means to bring the humerus back towards midline, and abduction means to move it away from midline, to move it laterally. So those are the motions that can happen at the glenohumeral joint, at the shoulder joint. So I tell you how many motions each one of these muscles is responsible for in these parentheses. So the supraspinatus is responsible for only one motion, and that is abduction. So the supraspinatus is situated in the superiormost position in the posterior aspect of the scapula, and it will snake over the top of the humerus and have an attachment there, so that when it shortens, it only does one thing, which is to cause the arm to rotate, or not rotate, but to move outward in an abduction move. That's all the supraspinatus does. Right. The infraspinatus does three motions. Now the infraspinatus is located below the spine of the scapula, and it's going to have an attachment a little lower on the humerus. So it's not coming over the top of it like the supraspinatus is, but it's kind of having an attachment towards the backside. So that means that one of the things that the infraspinatus is going to allow us to do is extend the arm, cause that arm to move backwards. The other thing that it can do is cause lateral rotation because it has a more posterior attachment. And then the last thing that it's going to do, because this attachment is a little lower, is it won't cause abduction, but it will cause adduction. Now the subscapularis is the muscle located on the anterior aspect of the scapula, and it's responsible for two motions. One of those motions is medial rotation. Now how does it accomplish that? Well, it does have an attachment that's very close to the glenohumeral joint, but it's more on the anterior aspect of the humerus. So when it shortens, it's going to cause the humerus to do a little bit of anterior rotation or a little medial rotation. The other thing that it's going to do is cause adduction. Now the teres minor is located a little bit inferior to the infraspinatus, and its attachment is going to be very similar to the infraspinatus. So as a result, we're going to see very similar motions as the infraspinatus. So the teres minor is going to create extension, it's going to create lateral rotation, and it's going to create adduction. All right, now let's take a look at the other muscle that we find attached to the scapula, and that's the teres major. Now the teres major doesn't have an attachment very close to the glenohumeral joint, which is why it is not one of the rotator cuff muscles. Instead, its attachment is going to be a little bit further down on the humerus, not mid-shaft, but definitely far enough away from the shoulder joint that it doesn't get included as a rotator cuff muscle. So what is this muscle responsible for? Well, it's going to create some extension, because it's located posteriorly. It can pull that humerus posteriorly. The other thing that it does is it creates medial rotation, and the way that it does that, it has an attachment to the anterior aspect of the humerus, so that when it contracts, not only does it pull the humerus backwards, it can also cause the humerus to rotate medially. The last thing that it's going to do is that it's going to also create adduction. All right. Now, if we look at what we have here, we can see if we look at the motions of adduction and abduction, we have one that does abduction, and then the other ones all do adduction. So we could say that supraspinatus is an antagonist to the rest of the muscles of the rotator cuff as well as the teres major. That's one thing we could say. With regard to the rotational motions, we could say that the infraspinatus and the teres minor work antagonistically with or against subscapularis and teres major. Now, all of these muscles have their origins on the back part of the body, which means that none of them are going to cause the humerus to move in an anterior position. That is a responsibility of a muscle that's located on the anterior part of the body. So we don't have any antagonist to the extension that gets created by these muscles found on the scapula. But we do in the motions of rotation and AB and adduction. So hopefully breaking it down this way makes it a little bit simpler. And with that, we're done.